Next, dips. So I think this is a good example of this sort of reductionist, biomechanically minded way of thinking that can get people into trouble. So he says that the elbow goes back when you are dipping, and therefore it's not going back that much, so you're not loading the triceps as effectively as some other exercises. And that's true. Most people are much stronger on dips compared to extensions for that reason. It is a compound movement using many different muscles.
One of them is the dip exercise. I know you've talked about this before. The dip exercise, to access your pecs, you have to move to the side, right? And when people move to the side, they damage their shoulders often on this exercise.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, look, I mean,
is this a valuable exercise?
No, not at all. There's no way that you can make the dip more like a dumbbell bench press.
However, you can't just look at an exercise in 2 dimensions. You can't just take a side view, a snapshot of what is happening, and say, oh, because it's this many degrees, it's loading the triceps this much. No, that's not how it actually works, because the body operates in 3 dimensions. Shocking, I know. 3 dimensions. Shocking, I know. 3 dimensions. Shocking, I know. So it's not just about the elbow going back, because it can go to the side as well. And even if it doesn't, the fact that you're still getting elbow extension and flexion means that the triceps are absolutely working. Same thing with the quads in a squat. Just because the knees don't go way forward, it doesn't mean the quads aren't working. If you take a wider stance, your knees might not go forward at all. And yet your quads will absolutely be extending the knee during the lift.
Shocking.
Shocking, I know. It's, you know, the level of arrogance is shocking. That's what's shocking, is the level of arrogance. And the idea that he would say that my thinking is reductionist when he can't even, swim his way out of a bathtub. It's like, this guy is such a novice, and then to say, that that I only think 2-dimensionally. Mm-hmm. Okay, first of all, he makes a mistake. Many, but one of them is that he starts talking about dips as a tricep exercise and then shows a clip of me talking about dips as a pectoral exercise. Okay, so we're talking 2 different things. Okay, first of all, let's talk about the triceps part of it, right?
Okay.
Moment arm, baby, moment arm, right? It's all about magnification of the load to the target muscle. In this slide right here, you can see I'm doing a decline dumbbell tricep extension. What do you see? Moment arm between my elbow and the weight. More when my forearm is horizontal, less when I'm approaching the top, right? By the way, this is the resistance curve that he never once mentions. You want more resistance. You want a bigger moment arm when the tricep or the target muscle is getting elongated. And you want less resistance, shorter moment arm, when the muscle is contracting because of the strength curve, the natural strength curve of a muscle, which is that it's stronger when it's elongated and it's weaker when it's shortened. Moment arm. Look at this next slide. Why is this considered a tricep exercise? It's because of the moment arm, but it's because of that horizontal forearm. It's because of the distance between the elbow and the weight. That's why that is considered a tricep exercise. Why is this considered a tricep exercise? Because of the moment arm, because of the distance between the elbow and the weight. That's why this is. Now, this is end phase loaded, so it's got other problems, and the overhead tricep exercise has problems too. But the reason why they're even considered tricep exercises is because they have moment arm. Why is this not? This next slide. Why is this not considered a bicep or a tricep exercise, generally speaking? Why is this considered a back exercise? It's considered a back exercise because the upper arm gets the moment arm. The upper arm has distance between the joint and that which is holding the weight, which is basically the elbow, by way of the connector, which is the forearm. In other words, in this example, the forearm is basically acting as the connector. It's no different than if it was a rope hanging from the elbow connected to a weight. It is in the neutral position. Now, if you're doing a 1-arm dumbbell row, and now this particular picture, you can see there's a very tiny amount of moment arm in the up position, the figure on the left, because he's tilting his forearm towards his head a little bit. Okay, that means he's actually loading the bicep a tiny bit. Tiny because of the tiny moment arm. If he were to extend his elbow a little bit so that the weight was slightly behind his elbow, he'd have a slight moment arm to the tricep, a slight loading of the tricep. If he keeps it perfectly vertical, neither the bicep nor the tricep would be loaded because they have a 0 moment arm, and only the muscles that are moving that upper arm would be loaded because that's the limb that's getting the moment arm. On this next slide is the parallel bar dip. Look at the tiny moment arm. Look at the difference between where my elbow is and where my hand is. 11 degrees. That's all. Now compare that to the other pictures I showed you of what qualify as good tricep exercises: skull crushers, overhead, tricep kickbacks, horizontal forearm, horizontal forearm, horizontal forearm. Do the triceps get loaded with parallel bar dips? Yes, they do. Minimally compared to the weight you're using, minimally percentage wise, right? We did the math on this, right? If you weigh 180 pounds, 90 pounds would be on each arm. The magnifier is the length of the forearm, which is a ratio of 12:1. 90 times 12 times 11% equals about 119 pounds of load on each tricep. That's how much you'd be getting if you weigh 180 pounds and you're doing parallel bar dips. Of course, you can see the upper arm is very horizontal. There's a significant moment arm there. That means the front deltoid is very loaded. And I'll tell you why the pecs aren't in just a minute. But it is not the forearm that's getting the moment arm, right? So if you were to compare that to skull crushers on your back using a pair of 20-pound dumbbells where the forearm does get horizontal, 20 pounds in each hand times the same factor of 12 times 100% equals 240 pounds of load per tricep. Twice as much load per tricep with only 40 pounds of total energy expenditure, right? So it is ridiculous to think that the parallel bar dips is as good a tricep exercise as lying dumbbell tricep extensions. The cost benefit is ridiculously different. You'd be a fool to think that triceps is a better tricep exercise, right? That's what we're talking about. That dips is a good tricep exercise. Okay, now on this next slide, I'm showing a chest exercise. And what I'm showing you there is in order for dips to be a good pectoral exercise, it would have to cause or allow you to move your arms away from the center, the midline of your body, where the origin of the pectoral fibers are. You need to move those fibers away from the origin in order to create elongation, right? And then you need to bring them together toward the midline of the body in order to get shortening of those muscle fibers known as contraction. Now, notice the width of my hands and the width of my elbows on that figure on the left. Parallel bar dips don't allow you to do that because they don't separate like that. The figure on the right shows where my hands would be if I'm able to get a full pectoral contraction. Parallel bar dips don't allow you to do that either because they're fixed. Therefore, parallel bar dips pales in comparison as a chest exercise to this, and parallel bar dips pale in comparison as a tricep exercise to flat bench skull crushers. That's what we're talking about. Why do an exercise that is so compromised, that gives you such little benefit? Why waste time with it? This is ridiculous that he's defending these things.
Clearly, he's biased.
Again, clearly he's trying to find something to complain about, something to criticize.
Next, the bench press. Now, I agree that the bench press is actually sort of overrated for chest development, especially with a barbell, because you can't get, that juicy chest contraction, etc. But it's certainly not bad. And just because something doesn't have as much range of motion as something else, it doesn't mean it's a terrible exercise. Plus, it's not nearly as injurious as people think, especially if you do it for moderate reps. You're not going to failure all the time. You're not lifting with your ego, and your technique is good. So it definitely puts tension on the chest, and you can absolutely build a ton of muscle with the barbell bench press. He also hates the incline press with a passion, and he says that it doesn't develop the upper chest. I personally would prefer a reverse grip bench press. Due to this external rotation, you can actually see it, right? This upper chest shelf activating. But the incline press with a normal grip absolutely still works the upper chest, okay? Because most people are doing it, tucking their elbows, as well as keeping the chest up and the shoulder blades retracted and depressed. So the incline press absolutely works the upper chest, no doubt about it.
So should we believe him because he just said no doubt about it, or we look at the book and read the science and the explanation and the physics?
Look, again, we've talked about if you do a bench press, there are muscles that are participating. The pectoral muscles are participating, the triceps are participating. I'm not saying that you get zero from a bench press. He says it's not the best exercise, but it's not a bad exercise. Is that what people want? An exercise that's not a bad exercise? Or do people want the better exercise? The best exercise?
The best.
Why waste time with an exercise that's compromised? If you were to lie on a flat bench with a pair of dumbbells and do a flat dumbbell press, you will get significantly more benefit than a flat bench barbell press. Period. You're taking these dumbbells and you're pulling them toward the midline of the body, which is what the pectoral muscles are trying to do, right? When you're doing a bench press, you can't pull to the midline of the body because your hands are connected to the bar. So you have to push outward, right? Which means that you're actually, if you put oil on that bar, your hands would slide out, right? Which means you're activating your triceps. Are you activating the triceps as well as you would be doing skull crushers? No, not as well, right? Is it better than not working the triceps? Yes. If you're not going to do the skull crushers, you're going to get some tricep benefit.
And also you want time fast, right?
Look, the bottom line is we focus on what works best and why. And not only why, but how much better, right? You will get significantly more pectoral involvement doing a flat dumbbell press as compared to a flat barbell press, period. It's not just about the range of motion. It's about the fact that you're independently loading each side, the fact that you're not encouraging this friction force thing to happen, this pushing outward. You're allowed to pull inward, which is what the pectoral muscles want to do. Then he talks about the incline press. He says, I hate it with a passion. First of all, I've never said I hate it with a passion because that's not what scientists do. We don't have an emotional bias with exercise. It's not about hating an exercise. It's about evaluating its level of benefit, right? In this graphic we're going to show you right here, you can see that the pectoral fibers do not extend above the shoulder line. The pectoral fibers go from the clavicle down to the sternum, and your arms are the very top of all those pectoral fibers. All muscles pull toward their origin. That's what they do. That's all they can do. No difference than if I gave you a rope and I tie it to a box and I say pull on the rope. There's no way you can pull that box in any direction other than toward you. If that box moves in another direction, it isn't you that's doing it. Right? Now you might contribute 10%, but something else over there has to be doing the pulling if the box is moving in that direction. Right? That's what happens with an incline press. You're moving your upper arms in a direction where there are no pectoral fibers. You're moving it toward your neck or toward your chin or towards your nose, depending on how steep the incline bench is, right? Which means that you're not getting 100% participation from those upper pectoral fibers, the highest fibers on the sternum and the clavicular pectoral fibers. Then he says, I prefer the front press. Yeah, the front press is a good exercise. I prefer doing it with dumbbells, but barbell is fine as a front deltoid exercise. It's a fantastic front deltoid exercise. And why? That's because when you're doing this, all muscles pull toward their origin. The origin of the front deltoid is on the outer part of the clavicle. And so you're moving the insertion toward the origin, right? Right next to that are the clavicular fibers. The clavicular fibers do participate in that front press. That's true. In fact, he is right in the sense that you will get more clavicular pectoral stimulation with a front press than you will with an incline press. Period. It's still more of a front deltoid exercise, but that part is true. When someone says you can build a ton of muscle on your upper pecs doing, really, how do you know? Oh, because people like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Frank Colombo had big upper pecs. Oh, so that's all they did? They only did incline presses? They didn't do flats? They didn't do declines? They didn't do anything else? Look, this is simple mechanics, simple logic. You cannot move a limb in a direction where muscle fibers are not located and think that those muscle fibers are the ones that are doing it. It's as simple as that.
Doug, so what are the muscles that are doing the job in the incline?
It's mostly front deltoid.
Okay, because we needed to say that.
Yeah, I mean, something's moving it, right?
Right.
But look, if you were to look at someone from the side as they're doing an incline dumbbell press, maybe from the side and slightly up, and then you could draw a straight line from either through the bar or through the dumbbells, you would see that that line falls right across their neck, right? Now, does that mean that because the highest pectoral fibers are close to that line, that they're going to participate a little bit? Yes, they do participate a little bit. You can see it, right? But you can, if you were to take that same person, assuming they're lean enough, and you put them on a flat bench with their shirt off, you would see more participation of those upper pectoral fibers on a flat press than you would on an incline press.
Okay. Another thing that I thought of now, maybe some people will ask it. So since you said the upper, the incline, okay, works more the front delt, didn't you say also that they both work together with the upper chest? So is it also working the upper chest to a good degree, or what?
Which one? The front press?
The incline chest press.
No, look, I mean, if you do an incline press and you're also doing flats and you're doing declines and everything else, you won't know what's causing the muscle growth. That's part of the reason why people are so confused, is because they look at someone who's got a big upper pectoral muscle and they do inclines, and they draw the conclusion that upper pectoral development is largely caused by that incline press. But mechanically, it doesn't make any sense. It can't be because of the incline presses. Now, I did a study of my own. I wanted to see what would happen. I did 6 months of nothing but inclines to see if it would make a difference. And it was not only the worst, it was the worst pectoral development I've ever had, frankly. I mean, it certainly doesn't work the lower part of the pecs or even the middle part of the pecs, but it doesn't even work the upper part of the pecs as well as a flat press would. It just doesn't.
Mm-hmm. Some people say you already have, like, that's one of your weak muscles, the pecs.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So is that a reason that because maybe your chest didn't respond to it because it's a good exercise, but you already had that weakness?
You know, when I was a kid, it was the one muscle that always lagged behind was my pecs.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like someone, I mean, there's lots of people that don't have a bicep, no matter how hard they train them. Boyarko didn't have abs, no matter how hard he trained them. Some people have small calves. You know, this is why we tend to revere people that have beautiful symmetry, because they're one of the fortunate few that have everything, right? But you can do the very, very, very best exercise for a weak muscle and still have the benefit be more compromising than it would be for a person who doesn't have that genetic tendency, or that genetic weakness, I should say.
Perfect.
Another one that I disagree with him strongly on are farmers' walks. So he got really messed up in the comments on this one. The like to dislike ratio is pretty bad. But his idea, again, it's this biomechanical way of thinking where, well, it's an isometric contraction, not very much range of motion, therefore it's a useless exercise. But that's not the case at all. You're working a lot of musculature. It is very useful just for normal people who often carry stuff, and it's a great exercise. Yeah, I understand his logic. Biomechanically speaking, on paper, in theory, it is a dog shit exercise. But in practice, it's really, really good. And that discrepancy is very, very clear in the reaction to this video. And the idea that any spinal loading is bad is pretty damn ridiculous, because again, the spine can adapt, and it's not like you get snapped up just because there's a load on your spine.
Okay, farmer's walk. So again, he misses the point. You know, I never said isometric is the problem with a farmer's walk. What I said is there's no moment arm. That's what I said. There's no horizontal limbs during a farmer's carry, right? They're all mostly vertical. They're all mostly in the neutral position, parallel to gravity, right? And getting back to the moment arm thing, right? So, and I think it's funny that he would say on paper, it's a dog shit exercise.
That's what I don't understand.
But in reality, it's a really, really good exercise.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that would be like saying, you know, we're going to fly this spacecraft to the moon, right? And on paper, it's dog shit. But trust me, it'll get there. Right? It's like, no, it can't work that way. It's got to be predictable. It's got to function like it looks on paper. The math has to add up. The math doesn't lie, right? It cannot be super good if it's dog shit on paper. That's number one. Number two is for him to say that the evidence that discrepancy is obvious, meaning dog shit on paper, really good exercise. He says, and that's obvious by the negative comments that he got on that video. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, first of all, let me just tell you that the farmer's carry is a very common exercise with CrossFit. And people that do CrossFit are as zealous and emotionally attached to it as people who do yoga and Pilates and there's almost a religious fervor by people who are, proponents of CrossFit. And so you're going to get a lot of people that are going to take an emotional issue to that. But let's look at this thing logically. Okay. Let's just say that you're going to do, I'm your coach and I'm telling you, pick up those dumbbells right there. And we're going to work our biceps today. And I want you to pick up those weights and hold them there or walk around the block with them. Is that a good bicep exercise? No. Why not? Because you never bent your elbow, because you never got any moment arm with your forearm. Same thing with tricep. Same thing with shoulders. If I was training you to develop your shoulders and I said, pick up those weights and now walk around the block with them, would that be a good way to develop shoulders? No. Why? Because you never had any range of motion and because you never let that upper arm bone get horizontal. You never allowed it to have any moment arm. We can go round on down the list and we can say, what about quadriceps? What about hamstrings? What about calves? Yes, because your foot is operated by the calf and that's horizontal and your clavicles are horizontal. And so, yes, the trapezius were going to be loaded. Would it be better for your trapezius to do an isometric holding of weight? Or I think everyone would agree, you'd be better off shrugging, right? So every single muscle right on through you can go through the anatomy and say every single muscle can be worked better with other exercises that have range of motion and that have moment arm, that have distance between the joint and the limb and that's holding the weight, right? So we are not here to tell people push a lawnmower up a hill because it's good activity. It's good, right? We're here because people want to know what's the best, most efficient way for me to load the muscles and get muscular development.
Right.
That is the context with which we evaluate exercises. And the fact that people don't like that I said that the farmer carry is not a good, efficient muscle loader doesn't bother me a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you were an engineer, you would understand. I mean, it doesn't only take an engineer to understand this, but we're talking mechanics here. We're talking physics. We're talking exercise science. Exercise science dictates that you're going to get better muscle development with range of motion and with a moment arm, with magnification of the load you're using, period. I mean, it's ridiculous that you would even debate that. No one's going to develop a Mr. America body with a farmer carry.
It's good that he brought that up. So at least we did the video and explain it, for him and for other people who saw those comments in the farmer's carry and now they get more.
By the way, he says it's a good exercise for people who carry things. You mean that all those other exercises I do, the regular shrugs, the curls, the back extension exercises, all those exercises aren't going to help me when I carry things? That if I don't do the farmer carry, that I won't be able to carry things? Never mind all the other exercise I did? Wow, that's very interesting.
He also doesn't like preacher curls, and I don't think they're nearly as risky as he says.
I have a question for you too. As far as strengthening tendons, could a preacher curl, with the amount of pressure done there, if someone uses it in a smart fashion, because people have torn their biceps on preacher curls, right? Frequently,
Yeah.
going too heavy.
Yeah.
But is there a benefit there if a person uses appropriate load for that tendon in terms of strengthening the tendon over time?
I've never seen any research that shows tendons getting stronger because of resistance. Just like, yes, bone density does increase.
Just because there's a stretch in the bottom part of the range of motion, even on the tendon, isn't necessarily a bad thing. Because guess what? Your joints and tendons can adapt. And I was actually pretty shocked. That he didn't know this. This isn't exactly new stuff. It's not just your muscles that adapt to exercise. Plus, if you're doing controlled, moderate reps, full range of motion, you progress gradually, you are natural, your risk of injury, even on a preacher curl, is astoundingly low. A lot of people who tear shit, they're on anabolic steroids and they progress too quickly or are very unintelligent with their training decisions. And this kind of fear-mongering is something I absolutely disagree with.
He just keeps putting that foot in his mouth, doesn't he? Look, first of all, he's got so many aspects of this wrong. Let's start off with when he asked me if there was any, when Nsima asked me if you could strengthen your tendons with a preacher curl.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I said, I've never seen a study that shows that. Now, What am I referring to? I'm referring to, I have never seen a study that shows that people who do preacher curls have a stronger bicep tendon than people who don't do preacher curls. I doubt they're going to do a study on that, right? I also know that there haven't been, or I don't think there's been any studies that have shown, how much tendon strength increases in people who do weight training as compared to people who don't do weight training, right?
Right.
It is logical to assume that there's going to be some tendon strength increase. It's logical to assume that, even though there may not have been a study about that. But more importantly, take a look at this. This is exactly the slide that he showed you, showing that tendon strength does increase, right? What he's showing you right there is that this study showed that rock climbers who had climbed a minimum, there's the word minimum, of 15 years had more tendon strength in their fingers than people who didn't do rock climbing at all.
15 years.
Now, first I would say is, you're not comparing, let's say, preacher curls to regular bicep curls. Both of them are going to load the tendon. Any weight training is going to load the tendon. You don't need preacher curl to load the tendon, right? You can't contract the muscle without tendon involvement, right?
Absolutely.
That's number one. Number two is, we're not going to wait 15 years to increase your bicep tendon because you've been doing 15 years of preacher curls. Nor should you do preacher curls for the purpose of increasing your bicep tendon strength, right? Now, that's part of it. The other part of it is this, is that he never once mentions mechanical disadvantage, which means he doesn't even understand the reason why I recommend against preacher curls. That is the reason. It's mechanical disadvantage, and he obviously does not know the anatomy and the physics well enough to know that that is the issue. That is the problem. Mechanical disadvantage is this. This is a model of an arm. Upper arm bone, forearm, elbow, bicep insertion. Okay? So when the bicep contracts, it bends the elbow, right? So what we have here is two things happening at the same time. One is the angle of this forearm changing moment arm, right? Here, it's a very small moment arm, 0, in fact. Here, it's a maximum moment arm, right? Here, it's a little less, and here, it's a little less. At the same time that's happening, you have an angle change of the bicep pulling on the forearm. Mechanical disadvantage, as I mentioned earlier with the infraspinatus, with the shoulder rotation, when you have a mechanical disadvantage, it only happens in flexion muscles. It does not happen in extension muscles. Flexion muscles are the elbow, the pectorals, the hamstrings, muscles that bend as opposed to extend a joint. You have this variable where sometimes it's able to pull on this forearm perpendicularly, and sometimes it has to pull mostly parallel. When it pulls from a mostly parallel angle, that's the mechanical disadvantage. This is the mechanical advantage. So you saw me earlier say that you could have to pull 9 to 10 times harder from a mechanical disadvantage in order to bend the elbow as compared to how it would be able to bend it if it was a mechanical advantage, right? So when you're doing a standing curl, you have a magnification of the force by virtue of this mechanical disadvantage. And so you have an increased resistance, but at the same time, you have a decreased resistance because of this low moment arm, the short moment arm, right?
Right.
As the moment arm increases, the load increases, but you gain mechanical advantage.
Mm-hmm.
So those things happen simultaneously and conveniently when you're doing a standing curl. If you were to put your arm on a tabletop and you had maximum moment arm here and maximum mechanical disadvantage, you would have the worst double magnifier, right? So if anyone wants to bet me that they will not tear their bicep, putting their arm on a tabletop and taking a 60-pound dumbbell and slowly lowering it all the way to the table till their elbow is perfectly straight and then curling it back up again, I'll take that bet. without tearing that tendon. Now, everyone knows when you do a preacher curl, it gets harder at the bottom. Do you know why? Double magnification. Everyone senses, if you've got a heavy barbell curl and you're doing it with a preacher bench, everyone senses that they cannot let that elbow go straight. Most people stop short of straight. Why? Because they sense that it's the danger zone, right? At the very least, they might consider the weakness zone, right? They're getting double magnification. Now, if you're at a 45-degree angle, you don't have quite as much moment arm here as you would on a flat surface, but you still have a lot more magnification given the mechanical disadvantage of the elbow when the elbow is mostly straight. Okay, so the question people have to ask themselves is simply this. What's the pro and the con?
Mm-hmm.
Is there an advantage to double magnification at the lower end? You know, when you're on a preacher curl, when you get to the top, you basically run out of resistance because the moment arm goes to zero when the weight is right over the elbow, and the bicep isn't even completed with its range of motion yet. You still probably have another 5 or 10 degrees range of motion, right? So you're loading up the low end a lot more and lightening up the upper end a lot more. And so you have to ask yourself, am I getting as good a bicep workout? The answer is no. You're actually not getting as good a bicep exercise. And at the same time, I'm incurring this risk if I go too low or too heavy of tearing that bicep and the bicep tendon. At one point, he says something like, it's not risky to stretch the bicep.
Mm-hmm.
I never said that. In fact, the opposite is true. When you would stretch your bicep if you have your arm behind you.
Right. That's not
Right.
stretching there.
You would stretch. You don't stretch your bicep, but that again, that isn't even the issue. The issue is mechanical disadvantage.
Mm-hmm.
And he right over his head. He said he read the book. He hasn't read the book. He hasn't read anything. He doesn't even know the most fundamental basics of physics. Open mouth, insert foot. I mean, this guy is so, and again, look, there's a lot of people, but at least they have the humility and the common sense to not pretend they know, and to criticize someone who obviously has studied the subject. So his arrogance is just flabbergasting.
And a sneaky way to show that, article, as if like when you said, I didn't see any study, he showed it because he knows people is not going to.
They're not going to look at it closely. Yeah.
Oh, there is one, and Doug missed it.
Oh, yeah, there is one. It's on rock climbers who for 15 years had to do this thing. And then they can see that their finger tendons are stronger than people who never climbed at all. It's like, yeah, that's not surprising. The question is this. The question is, should you weight train for the purpose of strengthening your tendons?
Right.
Well, I don't know why you would need to do that, but yes, if you load muscles and you load bones, you're going to get, and now does bone density increase at the same rate as muscle growth? No. Does tendon strength increase at the same rate as muscle growth? No. Right. So, but you're going to challenge the bone. You're going to challenge the tendons. You're going to challenge the muscles. Most people who weight train are going to do it mostly for muscular development, strength increase. Along the way, sure, the tendons are going to get stronger. Have I seen a study showing it? No, I have not seen a study showing it, but it's pretty obvious that it likely happens. How much it happens, we don't know, but you can pretty much count on it being. So when he says, and I was shocked that he didn't know this, it's like,
shocked.
Please.
But it's good that he did this. So now we're doing this video.
Yeah.
He also says rows are pretty much useless because it's not working the traps, because it's only working the upper arm, not the actual scapular protraction and retraction. Well, if you're rowing correctly,
and they just go like this. To me, I end up pulling with too much arms. Yeah. Too many biceps and brachialis in here. So I'll do it like you see a rower on a boat. So I'll come down with it and let the lat stretch out this way, and then pull back up, as I'll show you.
There you go. Yeah, I see what you're talking about. You're getting elbows past the midline really well. Like Stan Efferding talked a lot about that.
If I pull up too high, I'm not hitting the area I want. And by stretching it out like this, you're actually stretching your whole back out, all your lats, everything. You get way bigger back.
it absolutely does work the traps, okay? Because when you're rowing, you should be moving at the scapula. If you look at most people who do rows who are doing them well and actually getting the maximum from them, they are not just very mechanical or robotic in how they are doing them because they want to work the most musculature possible.
pull in, down and in for the lats, and backward shrug, because the middle trapezius does not even connect to the arms. It goes from the spine to the outer edge of the shoulder blade, and its only job is to pull the shoulders back. So when people are doing a rowing exercise, they are not doing a good lat exercise, and they're not doing a good middle trapezius exercise because they're not emphasizing the shrug. They're emphasizing the pulling with the arms. Well, guess what's pulling the arms? The rear deltoids. We look at the bodybuilders that have done these exercises, and they have impressive back development. So what I usually say is, I'm not saying these exercises don't work. So don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I mean, they'll look at someone like
they're not efficient.
They're not efficient. They're not getting. So what they end up having to do is you have to do a lot more of it. You have to spend a lot more time, a lot more effort in order to accumulate enough stimulation with the diminished percentages that they're getting in order to get adequate development.
I don't think replacing rows with some cable thing where you're like squeezing back and retracting and protracting is really worth doing. Often the cable machines don't go heavy enough, whereas with a barbell, you have infinite loading potential.
To infinity and beyond!
I'm not saying you should load up as much weight as, you can heft around, but it's there if you want to take it. Whereas a lot of cable machines, for me, it's 25 kilos per side. There's just no way that's enough.
Doug, just before you rip this apart, I just want to remind the viewers what they saw in the first option, where Mark Bell, that guy with Mark Bell, he showed him in the beginning that his arms were here and did this. But when he grabbed the bar, his arms were in the same width. So that's something to keep in mind.
Right, exactly. I mean, look, this guy, and I thought, I think I'll listen to Ed. Well, you would.
Yeah.
You would listen to Ed, right? Now, look, first of all, let me just say that even when he showed that picture of Ronnie Coleman, you can see that he's not actually letting his shoulders go forward and bringing his shoulders back. Okay. Scapular retraction is what the middle trapezius do. When you're watching Ronnie Coleman doing that, yeah, he's got these massive upper traps, right? And are they under load? Are they under tension? Yes, they are under load. There's no doubt. But we have to start with some principles, right? And one of the principles is range of motion. No one would deny that it's better to have range of motion than not. Period. There have been lots of studies, right? So will a muscle grow with isometric tension? Yes. Will a muscle grow with partial range of motion? Yes. Is it the most efficient way where you get the most grow with the least amount of wasted effort? No. We are all about efficiency. We're all about trying to identify what works best and why, logically, and then to recommend that, right? So here I'm going to show you a slide, and you can see a person here. We've blocked out his face because he's a friend of ours, but you can see he's doing a T-bar row, and you can see the red arrow pointing down is the direction of the resistance. It's the line of force, right? And the upper arrow pointing down is pointing to, I guess you could say, his upper trapezius, right? So that is going to be what is most loaded, right? So what I was explaining was pulling the shoulder, a backward shrug, right? So we're trying to get the middle trapezius, right? That's what we're trying to suggest instead of rowing, because most people row without pulling their shoulders back and they use only their arms. But as you can see on this anatomy chart right here, you can see that the middle trapezius do not even connect to the arms. They do not cross the shoulder joint. So when you do a rowing exercise and you are doing 90% or 100% arm motion and 0 rolling shoulders of the forward, rolling forward of the shoulders and rolling back of the shoulders, you are not elongating those middle trapezius fibers and you're not shortening those middle trapezius fibers. And that naturally, logically, scientifically is what works better for thickening those fibers. Now, the fact that these guys have big backs doesn't necessarily mean that they couldn't have a better back with less effort if they just did full range of motion, scapular movement, right? But number one, you have to have the direction of resistance coming from the right place, directly opposite the target muscle origins and range of motion. And here we're going to show you a variety of videos of people doing rowing exercises who are not rolling their shoulders forward and rolling them back. And some of these videos, as you can see, are big name bodybuilders. So when he says most people do roll their shoulders forward and back, that's false. We see it all the time. Now, you might ask the question, well, if these guys have big middle trapeziuses and they don't do that, is that necessary? And I would say, well, I can tell you this much. Obviously, they've grown. Obviously, it's worked well enough for them. But why would you waste time with something that has less chance of developing a muscle than doing something that has more chance. Logically speaking, range of motion logically produces more muscle, right? So it's hard, by the way, to get scapular movement if you have a narrow grip, if you're doing
Yes.
a T-bar row, and if you're, so that's why we recommend that the resistance come from the outside so that you have room to move your shoulders. If you're bunched up like this, it's hard to bring your shoulders back, right? And you're also not loading the muscle origins because it's not directly opposite, right? So these are other factors, but the bottom line is that it's ridiculous to think that that people are doing the right thing and that they don't need. And the other thing he was talking about was the 25 kilos. That's all you have on your cables. Oh my God, you must be working out on girls' equipment. This. And you're working out in a girls' gym or something. I don't know. I mean, what machine only has 25 kilos? I mean, the free motion machine that we have, there's no way I can even use 3/4 of the weight stack on scapular retraction. I think we have something like, 150 kilos on each side. I mean, this is ridiculous. Plus the idea that you're going to load a barbell and do a bent over barbell row, chest unsupported, and load up your lower back that much. Because don't forget, you're not only loading your lower back with the weight you're using, but with the magnification of your torso length to boot.
All right.
Right. So you're double loading the lower back while you're not scapular retracting, while you're doing it with a direction of resistance that's not quite right.
Something. And
Look, I'm not, we've talked about this before. I don't like criticizing people. And we're, of course, we're not criticizing him by name. But as I said, it's one thing to not know. It's another thing to not know and publicly criticize.
Right.
And to have such a discrepancy between your level of confidence and your level of knowledge, your absence of knowledge is what is shocking. What is really shocking is that the level of confidence compared to his lack of knowledge is shocking. And yes, he mentions fanboys at some point, right? And right, so there's going to be people that are fans of this guy who are going to say, yeah, you tell him, It's like, okay, calm down, open your brain a little bit, open your mind, listen, moment arm, logic,
Right.
think, common sense, right?
It's true. And many people in the comment section of the video that he made, I saw that they were looking for someone to be able to criticize what you did. They were looking for someone who has a voice or who has a slight knowledge to be able to point out like the things that you're saying and proving you wrong. And when that video was released, some people were very happy with it, even though like the things that he said, as we're showing right now, don't make sense, but they were happy to finally think that someone is thinking like them, and they weren't wrong all these years doing those exercises. Thank God.
Right. Well, this is what they call cognitive dissonance, right? This is people, and this is human nature, by the way. I mean, some people more than others have a tendency to have an emotional attachment to something they've been doing for a while. We have a tendency to not want to believe that we've been doing it wrong. We have a tendency to want to find support for what we believe. So we preferentially, meaning in large, I mean, people who are scientifically minded are doing just the opposite. People who are scientifically minded are looking for, let's say, a fly in the ointment. They're looking for something that might change a belief, right? Other people are not looking for something that might change a belief. People are looking for support for their beliefs, regardless of whether or not their beliefs are correct.
Right.
So that's called cognitive dissonance. And so, yeah, you will always find someone. Now, you might have seen that somebody on a different subject, we were talking about reciprocal innervation. And a couple of people mentioned this thing that's called Lombard's
paradox.
A paradox, right? And so, which is so funny. It's so ridiculous that anyone would suggest Lombard's paradox to support the argument that compound movements are good because they produce co-contraction. In fact, for those of you that don't know, you can go to my website and you can see I wrote an article called Lombard's Paradox.
I will add it to the link. Yes.
Yeah, inappropriately used. And so basically Lombard's Paradox says that there was this guy named Lombard in 1903 who was, he was a physiologist and he had some knowledge, not enough, but some knowledge of muscle physiology. And so he was looking at a barbell squat and he was really stumped because he thought, you know, this is really interesting because when a person does a squat, their quadriceps are clearly extending their knees and their hips are also extending, and the hip extension is caused by the glutes, but also by the hamstrings and also by the adductors. And so therefore, if the hamstrings are contracting because of hip extension, then they must also be, because of their contraction or shortening, they must also be trying to bend the knee. At the same time, the quadriceps are trying to extend the knee. So theoretically, they would be fighting with each other. They would be preventing the other from getting what the other one wants. So theoretically, squats shouldn't even be able to happen. And that's why it was called a paradox. He was mystified. In other words, he was basically thinking, and by the way, paradox by definition is something where it seems to defy logic or it seems to defy expectation. It doesn't mean that there are no rules. There are always rules. There are always rules. There's always something that's causing something, right? He just didn't understand it yet. 3 years later, Sherrington, a guy named Sherrington came along. He was a neurophysiologist. And he figured out that the central nervous system plays a role in allowing some muscles to relax while other muscles can work to not interfere with the other muscle. That's called reciprocal innervation.
Inhibition too.
Inhibition, it's the same thing. And basically what it says is that human beings, actually animals, right, require coordination. And coordination requires basically an orchestra leader.
Yes.
That basically is telling people to slow down and speed up so that this thing functions, right? We wouldn't have coordination if you didn't have a central nervous system that said, okay, you fire, you relax.
Yeah.
Because if both of them are firing at the same time, then you'd be spastic, right? You need to be able to flow and function. And so you have to have certain muscles letting go to allow the other ones to work, right? Now, in my article, what I explain is that there's a reason why the central nervous system shuts off the hamstring because of quadricep contraction, rather than shutting off the quadricep because of hamstring contraction. And that is because the hamstring is the lesser player in hip extension. The major player is the glute.
Mm-hmm.
The hip can be extended perfectly well without participation from the hamstring, even though under normal circumstances, it would participate a little bit, right? The quadricep is 100% responsible for knee extension. Nothing else can cause that to happen. So in order to let both of them happen at the same time, you have to prioritize the quadricep, right? Likewise, the rectus femoris, which is the part of that quadricep we were talking about earlier, that shuts off when you do a compound movement, shuts off because it is both a knee extensor and a hip flexor. It is the only one of the 4 quadricep muscles that crosses 2 joints. The other 3 parts of the quadricep only cross the knee joint. So they only do one thing. They extend the knee. So when the central nervous system senses that the hip extension activation is happening, it shuts off all the hip flexors. There's 5 hip flexors, one of which is that rectus femoris. Again, the central nervous system prioritizes shutting off the rectus femoris because you can still do knee extension with the other 3 quadricep muscles, right? So that's why it selectively does it. But this is the reason why you notice in EMG studies that the rectus femoris is deactivated, right? Because of this central nervous system, reciprocal inhibition, reciprocal innervation. It's the same thing. It is how the body works. So the idea that these fanboys of this guy would say, well, he's obviously not aware of Lombard's paradox, shows that they haven't even read Lombard's paradox. It is an expression of confusion. He was mystified and he was answered. The question to his paradox was answered 3 years later, but he was not a neurophysiologist. And now we know perfectly well, you cannot have co-contraction. It's been theorized. It's been theorized. People thought, oh, well, you can contract the hamstring and the quadricep at the same time. No, you can't. That would be considered co-contraction. By the way, there's another thing that was theorized for over 100 years called the luminiferous ether. For over 100 years. And by the way, this luminiferous ether theory was believed in, embraced by Isaac Newton and also by Descartes. And they believed that light travels in waves. And in order for light to travel in waves, it must be contained, it must travel through something.
Mm-hmm.
So they theorized the luminiferous ether, right? Turns out it doesn't exist. Einstein proved it. Several other people have now proved it. There's no reason why there needs to be something through which light can travel. So any one of you guys, you want to Google luminiferous ether, you will see it was a myth. It was a belief in something like co-contraction. Theoretically, you think it might make sense. In fact, it doesn't.